So I want to talk this morning a bit about what the heart is like. And yesterday we heard from Jyoti about conditions for metta. I quite like this image of many things all leaning on each other. Nothing stands alone. And one of the implications of that being that many things can be a way into metta. And also, if you're in a bit of a state, there's many ways out. And yesterday also I was saying a bit about structure and just this sense of structure is there to support freedom. It's a support for freedom. So in a way you need to use it freely, with a sense of freedom. So on the subject of freedom, Chaito Vimutti is the Pali term that is quite often crops up, meaning freedom of heart. Freedom of heart. So I want to talk about what is that heart that we're talking about? Because obviously we know we've got a literal heart that beats somewhere slightly over on the left. Some people have it the other way around though, not many. But we don't mean that heart, although it's not completely separate, but more a poetic heart. Yeah. So when we talk about the heart, well, when I do, what I'm talking about is how I feel, how we feel, and how we imagine, and I'm trying to describe that part of us that is exquisitely sensitive and responsive and full of feeling, the part of us that feels passionate, that empathizes, that has all these strong emotions like love and grief and rage, the part that can let go in forgiveness. So when we're talking about the path of metta, then we're talking about a path that engages with all those aspects of ourselves, the feeling, the sensitivity, the responsiveness, the sort of energetics. So we're talking about essentially a relational path. This is what I was saying a bit in the introduction. The way we shake with and are shaken by the world. There's a sort of betweenness that happens. So we're talking about a path that expresses this participative nature of life. And maybe a path where we explore the borders and the boundaries and the edges of that betweenness. So in a way we're exploring liminal space. I quite like the fact that the Greeks had a god for the edges, the borders, and the liminal spaces. So that's Hermes. So his realm is full of the edges and the borderlines. So maybe we can evoke him a little. So the Buddhist vision of what the heart can be when it's free is one that is suffused with metta in its fullness, sometimes maha maitri, great love. So it's this part of us that can have a sense of solidarity, love, intimacy, connection, harmony, well-wishing with what? With other living beings, with other human beings, but more than that, with all other sentient beings. But more than that, I think possibly plants are sentient, as Shraddha was bringing in yesterday. So animals, plants, all of life in its fullness. And I'd suggest we could even go beyond that a little bit, in the sense of an appreciation of or a sense of relationship with the elements. Because there is no life without the elements. So where is the border? Where is the boundary between air and life, between earth and life? It's an edge that we put in ourselves. So there's something about that, our relationship with all of that. So metta is also a universal quality in the sense of it's a capacity that we all have, speaking we as humans, but beyond as well, but certainly we all have and can recognize. It's also a quality that doesn't deny pain or unskillfulness. It's not a gloss over the top of things. But it recognizes that unskillfulness is to do with action. It's not to do with the whole person. Yeah. And metta is suffused with understanding or wisdom. The wisdom that allows things to love things just as they are without in any way diminishing our ability to act creatively. It's the opposite of aversion, resistance or hatred, which is basically a wanting things to be different from how they are. Yeah. So sometimes it's quite interesting just to explore what non-craving or non-hatred might be like. That quiet space takes us into the realm of metta. When we stop pushing and pulling at experience. So metta can be, and maybe quite often is, in its ideal form, portrayed as powerful, vast, maybe even blazing or fierce. But it can also be quiet and tender and subtle. So it's essentially has this quality of openness, expansiveness and radiance. Something I find quite interesting and helpful is these words. Sometimes we talk about the boundless. Well, we've got this title for the retreat, the unbound heart, but boundless or infinite. And they tend to go with a sort of sense of it's got to be big. It must be really big. For the heart to be boundless, it has to be huge. But actually, boundless just means you can't find the edge of something. So you might have quite a sort of small or tender or gentle sort of experience, but you can't find an edge. And that's boundless as well. So we don't have to do, massive. And the same with infinite. You just can't find the end to something. It doesn't have to be. vast into outer space. You just can't find the end. So it's got those qualities of not being able to find an edge and not being able to find an end. It's also, metta is also unconditional, so it wants nothing back. It's there for its own sake. And it's impersonal, not preferencing anyone or anything over anything else. So that's the Buddhist vision of what the unbound heart can be, which is the heart full of metta. But it suggests some things about what the heart is like. So one thing it suggests is that the heart has this reflexive quality. It has this doubleness to it. We can both feel how we feel inside, and we can also feel for the world out there. And you can actually just play with that directionality, so you can turn the heart more to a sort of interior space, and you can also choose to turn it outwards. You can try both. So metta practice does require both. So you can just explore, can you do them together? Do they alternate? If we're cultivating metta, but there's something we're too interior, we stay too interior, then we'll either tend to isolate ourselves over pain or become a bit precious or inflated over positive experience. If we go too outer, you can just lose yourself to others. So it's a very interesting area to explore. This reflexive quality, this bidirectional, but maybe it's multi-directional quality of the heart. So there's something else that Metta tells us about the heart, is that it's natural for the heart to open. It's a very natural thing. Metta is a natural feeling. So in a way, we're just looking at what gets in the way. What gets in the way of this natural opening. So what it means is you don't need to, as has already been said, you don't need to be trying to feel a particular feeling. If it's not happening, what you want to do is just look at the heart. Just go back to the heart. What is there? What is there? If the heart is feeling closed or numb, you don't need to force it. You just need to explore how to remove the obstacles to opening. So it's like that Rumi poem we had the other day. Your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. So I think in terms of what the barriers can be, a sort of incessant inner critic or judge can be quite a barrier for the heart. So we want to try and notice how we're speaking to ourselves. Quite often there can be some very harsh voices going on. So we want to, in a way, not listen to those voices, but also not push them away in an unkind manner. So somehow we need to find some sort of way of being kind with the critic or the judge, and also with what's being criticised or judged. Another obstacle is just that we don't listen. And maybe often we're just too impatient or too scared. So the heart is of a nature to wound. It's sensitive such that it will often bruise, which means it tends to be protected or guarded or even a little bit armoured. It's quite hard being sensitive. And the heart works at very different speeds. If you think about the speed of anger or falling in love, and then the speed of forgiveness, which can take years. You have to be patient. You have to be patient and sort of notice, just notice what, how to work at a speed that's appropriate. The deep things take a long, long time. And the heart requires both the sort of active engagement with and working with, not criticising but encouraging, and also receptive listening, a deep listening. So what we're trying to do is have a conversation with this very sensitive, feelingful, empathetic part of ourselves. So I'd suggest, maybe this is something for you to go away and explore, that the heart has its own language. I think the language of the heart is more of poetry and image rather than concept. Don't think the heart's particularly logical or linear or necessarily systematic. Which is why it's interesting when we've got Metta, which is quite systematic, stagey and linear. So that's why I was talking about how to work with these sort of structures. Because the heart won't take that kindly to being systematised. So when we're working with the heart, so although we've got a fairly long retreat, we've got 12 days, actually it's just a very slow process, so 12 days is nothing. The heart takes all the time it takes, which is years, lifetime. I didn't have didn't really get on with my mum that well when I was young, and when I came across the Metta, she went in the fourth stage for about 10 years. And it kind of didn't absolutely solve everything, but it did really move the relationship along. And so when she died, I felt really pleased that I'd bothered for 10 years to do that work, because it made the relationship much easier and the letting go much easier. It felt like I'd done what I could. And it just seems important to do what you can, in your relationships. So you need to give the heart all the time and the space it needs. You're not going to get anywhere without your heart. So patience and slowness is the shortcut. And with this image of the tree that Dayajoti introduced yesterday, the heart will open with the conditions it needs. So we're just learning to tend the heart, which is a bit like gardening. It's a bit like if you tend to the soil and the water and the nutrients, and you make sure it's got some sun. The actual growing of the plant doesn't need you. It'll do that bit. So I think I just want to finish something about listening, because I think we need to learn to listen to the heart. And I think it's important to be able to sit with not knowing. In a way, to listen, you just have to wait and not know, and that can be quite uncomfortable. A sense of, well, I don't know where I am and I don't know what I'm doing. There's this uncertainty. But I think you can also reframe that uncertainty as you sitting right on the edge of mystery. And it's a space that we need to learn to inhabit. It's a space where you can begin to come into conversation with your heart and where it can speak to you of the world. And where the heart of the world can speak too.